So once upon a time in Black entrepreneur history, there lived an African-American man named Frank L. Stanley Sr., who became a legendary editor, founder, and publisher of the Louisville Defender newspaper, one of the most influential papers that covered the civil rights movement during the 50s and 60s. Let's get into it. Now, Frank L. Stanley Sr. was born in 1906 in Chicago, Illinois, but later moved to Louisville, Kentucky with his mother after his father died. He graduated from Central High School and then went on to attend Atlanta University, where he showed out. He was the football quarterback, basketball captain, varsity debater, student council president, and editor of the student newspaper. After graduating from Atlanta University, he went on to teach at Jackson State University for about 3 years before moving back to Kentucky to teach English at his old high school. He was also a coach. He later stopped teaching and in 1933 went to become the editor of a newspaper called The Defender. Now listen up. The Defender was owned by an African-American man named Robert Abbott. This man was a son of formerly enslaved parents, a lawyer, and also the founder of another newspaper called the Chicago Defender, which was the biggest African-American newspaper at the time in the United States of America. Well, in one purchase, Frank L. Stanley became the founder of the Louisville Defender. So now there were two Defenders, one in Louisville and one in Chicago. Now back to Frank in Louisville. The Louisville Defender became legendary, and so did Frank. The newspaper covered the sit-ins, the protests, even riots that happened during the civil rights movement. Now, because Frank L. Stanley Sr. was a civil rights activist, he knew a lot of other civil rights activists, right? Now, here's where it gets good. He was one of the first people to raise money for the Montgomery bus boycott of 1955. Not only that, he assisted in the drafting of the law forming the Human Rights Commission in 1960. And not only that, he was friends with Governor Burt Combs. The governor then commissioned him to draft a law creating the 1960s Human Rights Agency. Frank L. Stanley Sr. also influenced the governor to order an executive ban against all discrimination across the state of Kentucky. From there, Stanley was even appointed to the Human Rights Commission. Now, before that, in 1950, Frank L. Stanley Sr. was the one who drafted the bill that integrated Kentucky state colleges and universities. He was praised by Harry Truman and Lyndon Johnson, the presidents of the United States of America, as being the leading black publisher. Truman actually sent him to France to meet the president and the Pope, as well as study how American troops were being segregated. The results of that study paved the way for an integrated armed forces. So yeah, for anyone who doesn't know how African Americans get things done, that's how we get things done. Now, unfortunately, during the 1974 Louisville Black Expo, Frank L. Stanley passed away. He'd been diagnosed with heart disease prior. He just suddenly fell dead and that he was not able to be resuscitated. He was only 69 years old. However, in 1983, he was inducted into the Kentucky Journalism Hall of Fame, and the Louisville Defender still runs today.